Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today, we're going to talk about the Gibson Les Paul Supreme, the highest-end Gibson USA Les Paul guitar at its time of introduction. When were these things introduced? It was for the Summer NAMM show of 2003, and they've been in production on and off throughout the years. But when I first started to get into guitars and started to visit Guitar Center and other music stores, I remember trying a Supreme and just not liking it. So I just never purchased one for myself. However, about a year ago, we reviewed the 125th anniversary of the Les Paul Supreme, and that just changed the way I viewed these things forever. These things are so non-traditional, but it's definitely a very cool model. It's one of those things, as you get older, you get wiser, so you can appreciate things differently. So first, let's talk about the Supreme case. These things are so special, I actually made a separate upload about Supreme cases a good couple of years ago. So these have upgraded handles. So looking right here, it might not look too different, but look at this. It has a metal loop right here, and then that attaches to a nice padded handle. These Supreme cases are fascinatingly nice. But as far as the latches, they're all the same. However, as we open this, you will see some differences with the interior of this, as well as this just absolutely gorgeous Les Paul here. So first, before we finish talking about our case, let's look at this. That is an awesome top on a Supreme. This is a trans black Supreme. It's just so insanely beautiful. I had a viewer of the show reach out to me. They said, hey, I need to sell this guitar. Would you be interested in purchasing it? And to that I said, yes. I have not actually reviewed a regular Supreme on the show, so I just thought this one was fantastic. It's got mineral streaks, it's got a whole bunch of figuring, and just in case you don't know what makes a Supreme, it's also got it on the back, and there's no back plates on these things, so they're larger than normal Les Pauls. Think archtop guitar, but kind of shrunken down to Les Paul shape. They wire them through this giant output jack plate, and the carved back and top just makes these things gigantic. We'll get some more measurements on the workbench, but you can see the headstock has that Supreme globe on it. Not only do we get the Super 400 inlays, but we also have golden frets. Supremes are just completely different beasts here. But anyways, let's get back to the case. You'll see that the interior of these is like a crushed velvet-like material. Now this one, it feels like a regular Gibson USA case, like the earlier ones have a slightly different feel, but they always have that crushed look to it, which I love. And you're going to notice you get lid ribbons on these guys. Not just one, not just two, 3 of them, so you know they won't break. Now as far as our case candy goes, looks like somebody's replaced some tuners on this one with locking ones. And it looks like the seller included some new gold hardware if I wanted to replace it. So anyways, let's learn a little bit more about the Supremes. I told you they were introduced in 2003. It was initially just supposed to be a limited edition run. They offered them in Heritage Cherry Sunburst, Desert Burst finish, you had a root beer, and a trans amber. Now off and on since then they've had these things in production. However, with these things being so expensive to make, it appears the new ownership of Gibson does not want to make Supremes anymore because we have not seen them in the Curly era. In fact, that's when you can check out the 125th anniversary Supreme video. How that started at the end of the Henry J era, and the Curly era actually cut it short. They definitely did not produce the 125 of those that they promised. There's maybe 30 of them out there. So as an update to that video, yes, if you have a 125th anniversary Supreme, I'm now going to rank that as the #1 most collectible Supreme because of its storied past. But besides that limited edition one, there was also the 2005 90th birthday Supreme for Les Paul. Les Paul actually signed those guys. What makes those interesting is they actually have a mahogany back. You can also find 2 limited edition ones within the Guitar of the Week series in a gold top that looks very similar to the 90th birthday one, but without the 90th anniversary inlay and a few other aspects. And the Autumn Burst one with the figured ebony fretboard that they decided not to put any inlays on because of that. Then in 2015, there was the Florentine series, which took the Supremes on a whole different trip. So naturally, despite these being Gibson USA products, not traditionally hyper collectible guitars, it's usually custom shops that people will collect, they're so unique that there are some niche collectors out there for Supremes. And I've got to say, really starstruck by this one, I guess. You know, in person, like the top has some decent movement. It's not the most active looking top, but although the wood grain and the mineral streaks and the finish of this one, I don't regret buying this thing at all. I just wish it had like a flamed maple neck on it or something, because when you get to the back right here, there's not much color on the neck. But hey, say you hate flame tops, you can also find solid colored Supremes, which if you like everything that a Supreme is, but you don't like how flashy they are, that's when somebody might want one of the black ones or the white ones within there. You can also find like translucent white ones if you want the best of both worlds. But this is one of the newer Supremes from 2013, so to learn a little bit more about it, let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench and take an individual look at its parts and specs. Uh-oh, I got scammed by a viewer. Now, to be fair, he said he hadn't had many Les Pauls. He bought it from someone on Reverb, and then he was just selling it to me to move it on. Yeah, unfortunately, somebody took advantage of him. So our pickups in here are not original. So PG50N in the neck when it's supposed to have a 490R. And then our bridge position's really strange. There's no markings on it. They appear to have like ground it off using the bridge pickup. And then you have a 4-conductor lead coming out of that. Now that could be like a 57 Classic that's had its decal taken off. But I'm not holding out too much hope on that. So that made it an easy decision to leave the locking tuners on and swap the tailpiece since, you know, we've got some other stuff going on here. But hey, I always say if you're a modder, do not buy one of these Supremes. And isn't it ironic that I get a modified Supreme? You have to fish everything through this hole right here. So it's kind of tedious. But somebody has went through the process of putting push pulls on this thing. Obviously, they did it on these two because it's a little bit easier to get into that area. But hey, here's my suggestion for you. If you want to buy this guitar from me and you don't like these pickups, cut these leads right here and just splice them onto your existing lead of whatever pickup you do want in here. Because then you don't have to mess with any of that. That's all good to go. But yeah, unfortunately, if you tuned into this video to hear how a regular Supreme sounds with the stock 490R, 498T pickups, you're gonna be a bit disappointed, sorry. Wouldn't have reviewed this one had I had known. But that's alright, this thing's beautiful anyways. BL, probably for translucent black or something like that. And then LPSU for a Les Paul Supreme. Here you can see your 2-piece maple top with your mahogany body. Then you can really start to see the whole chambering process of these Supremes. You can kind of see the body post right there and how it just goes all through. We'll break out the endoscope here in a minute because I don't think I had that on my last Supreme. Our bridge looks like so, Advanced Plating Incorporated branded, and the original one looks like this, also Advanced Plating Incorporated branding, but I'm going to hold this one back in my parts drawer and go ahead and put a nice fresh gold one on it since it's not all tarnished like the original. I am going to leave the bridge alone because that's not too bad, and this one's more stylistically pleasing to me. Let's check out our pickup readings. We get 9.16k ohms in our bridge position. Our neck pickup is, whoa, 12.31, okay. And middle position, 5.25. Now I guess we should make sure those are splitting, which that does indeed seem to be what it's doing. Well, or is it just a tap? 7.32 in the bridge versus 9.15. Okay, so that's not a full-on split. How about our neck pickup? 942 versus 1231. Wow. What is this thing doing? And just for fun, 4.12 in the middle with whatever that's doing, then off 5.25. So it's not a full-on split. We'll have to see what that's doing. Regardless of what parts are on here, this is an absolutely breathtaking top. Now, it's not perfect either. You actually have somebody was like tightening this and they kind of gouged the top in a little bit right there. There's some scratches. Continuing on down here, you can see some impressions. I'd say the biggest one's like right there. Those are pretty minor though, but I love that streak of whatever that is with this finish. Looks pretty nice. Then yeah, golden knurled knobs. Hopefully it's still 2 volumes, 2 tones. We'll have to check that. These have been replaced though. And it looks like we've got a couple of dings and scratches here just from regular playing. Alright, so let's dig in here. We're going through our neck pickup cavity here, where we can just see a
big giant route underneath here that gets us to all our controls. It's just all open, whereas we can also look at our toggle switch right here. So it looks like the wiring for the most part was left alone on that thing. But there's a rare look at the underside of the maple top right here. So you can see how that just continues on in here, and it's a little bit wider than normal. But continuing down here, it's not like a semi-hollow guitar that has kerfing along the edges. These are all solid woods right here. They've just been chambered out. So since this has been modified, I'm interested to see how professional of a job this was. Which is still kind of hard to do even with an endoscope, but yeah, it looks like they used a bunch of colored wiring. Semi-what amateur hour, but it still works, is the vibes I'm getting from what I can just vaguely see here. However, to be fair, now that I've worked with F-hold guitars that you had to fish things through it, this would actually be pretty easy to take that stuff out and get it in there. Not as easy as a back plate, but nowhere near as hard as I've been making it out to be. So here's what I can tell the way that they chambered this one. It might actually be different from the earlier ones. So we've got a little area right here, and then it kind of carves this out, but then this is still solid yet. So they have all that. Looking in here, this is actually blocked off right there. So it almost just seems like it's this that's chambered out, which is a little bit different than what you normally see online. That's why I really need to get an x-ray to x-ray some of these things, because they could change things at any time they want. Nobody's ever gonna know. Even with endoscopes, it's kind of hard to tell. But now, moving on from our mahogany body with maple top and back, let's move on to the neck. Now earlier, I think I misspoke and said ebony. The early ones have ebony. Since this is a 2013, this is technically Richlight. I had to look good, long, and hard at this thing. I thought for sure it was ebony. It looks ebony. It almost has that wood grain look to it, but sometimes Richlight will look like that as well. So the best test that I formulated is you take a little bit of steel wool and just do your regular cleaning job of your fretboard. Go with the wood grain and go really fast till it kind of heats up, and then sniff it. If you smell a burning rubber smell, you know you've got Richlight. Well, at least for a more modern guitar anyways. There's some 70s and 80s guitars out there that has something called ebonol. That stuff reeks when you work on it. Even just like normal light polishing. If you want to check one of those guitars out, you can check out the Epiphone Spotlight video. So yeah, one of the more convincing Richlight fretboards that I've seen. This is nice. Now let's take a second to appreciate our golden frets. I always say gold frets sound really cool in theory, but in practice they just look rusty no matter what you do. Now it's just gold coated, so I'm sure if you didn't like that, you could use some metal polish cream and you could probably take that right off. But we've got 22 medium jumbo frets with the 12-inch fretboard radius. Regular 24 3/4 inch scale length with neck specs of 1.7 inches at the nut and 2.09 by the 12th. With the first fret neck depth of 0.87, that increases to 0.99 by the 12th. Here's what the neck looks like at the 1st and 12th fret. I guess while we're at it, we should measure the body here. About 2.25 inches, so that's a good 1/4 inch thicker than most Les Pauls. And that's not even at the top. Remember, these are carved tops and backs. So we measured it right there, but you should be measuring it from there, and then you also have that on the back, so that's why these things are just so massive. They're probably somewhere between 1/4 to 1/2 inch thicker than most Les Pauls. I mean, they're pretty chunky, and that's why they feel good. Like, if you are an archtop player, but you want to try a smaller bodied Les Paul, I would heavily suggest something like this, because it's gonna feel like what you're used to, but still be that Les Paul shape. Anyways, moving on to our headstock. You can see what our truss rod looks like on this one. Everything's looking good. The mahogany neck right there. The truss rod covers on these do not read Supreme, they just read Les Paul, and they're brass. Here's our Supreme globe on our headstock. Always pretty cool looking. And of course your Gibson mother of pearl logo. Now, up on here, you can kind of see some impressions right there. That's from somebody leaving a clip-on tuner on this thing for an extended period of time. You'll see that on the back, too. You really got to get it in the light to see it, but I don't want anybody to be disappointed if they buy this. And it looks like Gibson was hiding a ding right there underneath our truss rod cover. This looks like a chip in the finish, but I don't know what it is. It's not a chip, though, I don't think. And then stock, you have regular Grovers, but somebody put locking on here. I'm just going to leave that as is because, you know, everything else has pretty well been changed. So I might as well leave this a highly spec'd out beast for a player. Moving on to the back here, something interesting I was noticing while cleaning this. Did you know how most Les Pauls, they come to a complete top right here, and then they kind of curve down. This one more so just flattens out. Like, it's going to be impossible for me to show you that, but it swoops up and then it's just flat right here. There's no more gradual carve. Whereas the top has more of that carve. You can kind of see what we're talking about right there. Versus this one just flattens out right there, if you can see that within the reflections. The biggest spot is really just right there, but it's definitely got some scratches and impressions back here. A couple of buckle marks. I mean, you really got to be looking for most of this stuff though, but that is a beautifully wide back right here. Very nice looking. This one has Dunlop strap locks on it, which is not factory. Now you will notice this has 3-ply binding on the back and 7-ply on the front. But we'll take a quick look around the edges. They're just black. I really wish they just would have went trans black on this entire thing, but at the same time, it does have a very cool evil vibe to it. Some things to talk about. There is a finish crack right here. It kind of stems from where the binding ends and then just kind of went haywire for a little bit. Sure, it looks like a crack, but it's not. Moving up the backside of the neck, it's also a straight up ebony finish. You've got some scratches from use on this one as well, and a few other things we need to talk about. So the base side of the neck looks just fine. But when you swap over to the treble side, there's an area right here where the lacquer has disappeared and the binding was shaven down just a bit too much right here. I'd be curious if it actually left the factory like that. We'll have to take a look at that under blacklight. You at least have some finish missing. Now, as far as how it feels to play, you hardly even notice that, but it is there. And you can see the finish is cracked around where the nut actually ends. And then similar to what we saw when that happened, you got a small one right there. That's definitely not in the wood. Now moving up the backside of our headstock, you can see the made in 2013 model right there and our serial number dating it to 2013, 226th day of the year, initial batch 395th in production. And right here, that little butt you see, that's from the clip-on tuner that was left on here. Which under blacklight, you can just barely see that. There seems to be some sort of like maybe sweat or something that was on there. I'm not sure. Never seen that before. Talking about that line running down here. We definitely have some evidence of this being on a wall hanging device. You can see the stand rash, as they call it, along the edges. Thankfully, the black finish hides that in regular lighting. We can look at that finish check area right here. That's what's always interesting about these Gibson USAs in the 2010s era. They use like a different type of binding for the headstock, so it always glows crazily. But here you can see our finish is even, and then that strange spot I was talking about earlier. That definitely looks more so like it might have left the factory like that, but who knows. Crazier things have happened. But there's a good look at that finish crack right there as well, and how it's stemmed. But our top's looking great here, as is the back. So yeah, more so player's grade at this point, but definitely not abused. All said and done, this one's actually kind of chunky. 9 pounds, 4.9 ounces for a completely chambered out one. All right, let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this one sounds. All right, let's go ahead and give this a go, starting with our neck pickup. Some pretty nice tones there. But now, most Supremes can't do this, but let's try to figure out what this is doing. So bridge pickup normal sounds like this. Pull up on that and
So it's definitely making it more single coil-like, but judging by the readings, it's not completely splitting it, which is kind of interesting. This sounds very convincing to me. Versus our neck pickup here. And of course we can try our middle position as well. Very cool. Let's go ahead and try some distortion. I actually kind of like the pickups that are in here. That coil tap or whatever it is just gives you that little bit of extra brightness to it. Now that we know all about this Les Paul Supreme from the Richlight era, what are my final thoughts on this thing? Unfortunately, this one's not fully original, but hey, I didn't think the pickup sounded that bad on here. And having the additional tonal opportunities on this one is definitely a bonus if you're looking for a player's version. I really didn't mind the Richlight on this one. Sometimes Richlight feels really dried out, but this one's almost 10 years old now. It really does start to feel good once it's been played in a little bit. Just get your finger oils all over it, and then it'll start to look and feel like ebony. I was kind of surprised that this was Richlight at the end of the day. But yeah, Supremes, they're just a little bit different. I really suggest them if you're like a jazz guy that's used to your big L5s and whatnot, but you want a Les Paul styled instrument, that's who these are really perfect for. But at the same time, if you like Les Pauls, but you want something a little bit beefier, these things are very interesting for that as well. So I would suggest for like every like Les Paul collection, or if you just like Les Pauls in general, to try one of these things out because they are different enough. It's not just that they have a fancy top and back to them, it's that they're just completely different in the way that they construct these things. So that's why the solid colored variations of these also make sense, because these are just like no other Les Paul out there. So if nothing else, give one a try. Alright, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this regular Les Paul Supreme, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next episode.
Take care.